My Gavanan, Melanin. Today it's time to talk about the Pell, its potential application to your sword training. Stay tuned. That was in the 5th century. Roman author named Vegetius was writing in the years following the disastrous defeat at Adrianople, in which a Roman emperor was actually killed. He was reminiscing to some degree about how, the old Roman legionaries used to train this way, and we don't do it anymore. So it's a good little snapshot of how they actually trained. He described a couple of techniques, one of which was they were erecting a Pell, a wooden stake in the ground, to about 6 feet high, and they would issue wooden swords to their soldiers and give them wicker shields to practice with. And it goes something like this, you know. You can see the application of if you have 100 raw recruits, you don't want to go to each one and say, here's how you do this, here's how you do that. It would take too much time. So apparently what they would do is get these guys going, and then you can spot the problem and make an example and see somebody who knows what they're doing and say, that's the way you should be doing it. I imagine it'd be a little more efficient that way. Vegetius also mentions that they would instead of the regular wooden sword, they'd be issued a sword that was twice the weight of the regular gladius. And here I got an iron bar. It's about 5 pounds or so, which is twice the weight of the sword. And the shield would also be bumped up in size or weight as well. I don't have that, but you can imagine going at this in the same manner. Now, let's see. This is supported by Sports Science Today. If I can briefly go to the books here and say, sports training. A baseball player can train with a lighter than usual bat in order to practice high-speed movement. The lower inertia of the bat allows the bat to achieve higher speed. In contrast, a heavier than usual bat provides greater inertial resistance, which slows down the speed of the swing and provides higher inertial resistance. This training method allows the athlete to train the neuromuscular system over a wider range of the force velocity curve than does training with only the normal bat. And sometimes you'll see batters in baseball warming up with some sort of weighted ring slipped over their bat. Now it's achieves some criticism because if you are swinging, a couple of things I want to point out. If I'm going against a post that I've just shoved in the ground and I bring out a heavy sword and try to clobber it, I might eventually see this fall down. I'm not sure if that would be where you want to go with this. But the issue with the batter is that if I'm just swinging this back and forth, I'm basically forced to go slower. And if this is all I'm doing, my neuromuscular system is going to be conditioned to going at that speed. However, if I practice a little bit with this, then go back to my waster, which in fact is a lot lighter than my regular service weapon, and suddenly I'm going whippity, 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 whippity. in my neuromuscular system is learning to go a little faster. So that when I finally do pick up my service weapon, I'm a little more efficient, a lot more efficient. Now, speaking of a seal weapon, you notice in Vegetius he doesn't mention issuing the seal weapons and having the raw recruits slamming them against the post. Good way to destroy valuable steel. That's not what you do with this. In fact, so you actually you'd be doing this with a wooden sword which is destructible. Another point is that we learned this with Temeshigiri against the cutting the mats, I should say. We don't cut to the target. Imagine what happens, what sort of habits you learn. Cutting to the target, you're not smiting you're not training to smite your opponent with enough force to actually make a difference. So you've got to learn to cut through that post. And I'm sure that's what the Roman trainers were pointing out as they went down the line of raw recruits, saying, "Oh, do not cut to the target, cut through the target," or something in Latin, whatever they said. A couple other points is that the Romans had a gladius, which is about maybe that long, relatively lightweight sword, and they pretty much preferred, in fact, Vegetius points out that the preferred technique was thrusting. Now, thrusting against something like this, or training to thrust with a sword against something like this, it's not the most efficient training for thrusting. In fact, you don't really thrust through. When you hit it, you stop. And you're training to stop the thrust, like you would in, I don't know, modern fencing, where you say, "Okay, touch, I scored," instead of, "I just run you through." Also, getting a gladius to double weight, it may not really affect or benefit the soldier that much. And in fact, the shield that the Romans carried, I've got a replica Viking shield here. This is maybe 12 pounds, and I can see having a 24-pound boat anchor would help me be able to move this quickly when I went back to my regular shield. It's definitely a benefit. The Roman scutum, which was gigantic compared to this, I'm sure they would have put a heavier weight on that because you needed really a lot of strength to handle that. It was not a very mobile shield. However, one point I want to observe is that the Romans were not real good at inventing stuff by themselves. A lot of the stuff you see the ancient Romans using was stolen from someone else. So I can imagine this technique of using the Pell being stolen from some other culture, the Greeks, the ancient Greeks, the Celts, the Germans, who were actually using a cutting sword on a smaller shield. Because this works out pretty well with this size shield and this size sword, especially if you're emphasizing cutting techniques, right? Anyway, how does this help us? You can actually get some sort of simulator weapon. I recommend just going to the hardware store and picking up an iron bar, putting some sort of handle on it, right? Weighing it if you have a chance, so that's about twice the weight of your regular sword, and training with this. You don't have to necessarily hit Pell. The benefit of the Pell mainly is distancing, and we've certainly learned that with temeshigiri, cutting the rolled up mats. I can go back here and cut through all I want. And I'm exercising the very muscles that will be used in accelerating the sword. Oh, excuse me. Accelerating the sword from the 0 to 60, so to speak, from a inertial position of not movement to continuing and stopping that in the appropriate spot and controlling the direction that it goes, changing the direction. All these things can be developed with a heavier simulation of a weapon, but always go back and do a few rounds with your service weapon, or most wasters are a lot lighter than real weapons that they represent. So this could be represent your half-weight weapon. And go ahead and use some movements to develop some quickness. There's actually two kinds of effects you will notice with this. One is immediate. As soon as you do a session with a heavyweight weapon, you go back to your regular weapon, suddenly that weapon seems a lot lighter. It's not, of course. And you haven't developed any permanent strength, but your timing, the timing of your neuromuscular system has changed a little bit, so that you're sort of accommodated for that. It's not a long-term effect, but it gives you some clues. It's like a pump after you work out. It sort of gives you a clue as to what you're doing. But over a long-term effect, 2 or 3 times a week, over, I don't know, 6 weeks or so, you'll notice that you'll be able to pick up your regular weapon and play with it like a baton. Can also be done with, of course you can train for a two-handed weapon the same way. I've got a gigantic metal bar that represents my bastard sword. It's, I think it was like 8 pounds or something like that. I weighed it at the hardware store. And of course I put a little cheap funky handle on it. I can do all my cuts with it. A nice workout. And I pick up a relatively light waster wooden sword and try to do the same thing and simply fly through it. Then finally, when I'm with my regular service weapon, I am very comfortable with this at this point. Let's see, what else can I pass on? So this is a place where ancient Roman texts, speaking of the Roman gladiators, Roman soldiers, and in fact he did mention the gladiators used something similar, agrees with later medieval texts from like the 15th century, also talked about the same thing. So obviously this tradition was carried on and probably borrowed from something that was even earlier. And it also agrees with modern sports training concepts. So why not pick up some of this and try to work on this yourself. Instead of going to the gym, air-conditioned gym with all these stainless steel machines, go outside and put up a Pell, play around in the backyard a little bit. One more thing I should mention, I want to go through this later, is that there's a lot of other movements, training movements that can do, right, to strengthen the individual muscles that you are relying on during sword combat. I'll try to go over that in some future video. Anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you learned something. If you have any ideas, questions, comments, post them in the comments section. And if you like this, like it. If you want to subscribe and get more videos, it's over here someplace. I'm sure there's a button somewhere. And tune in again. I'll try to get more things out to you soon. Thank you very much.